when we talk about relative humidity is actually a calculation. It's not a thing. It's not a prime measurement. And everyone thinks they understand relative humidity until you point out that you can have the same relative humidity at many different temperatures.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. It is your hungry and humble host, Phil Bass, here with another episode with somebody who has some very interesting technology that I want to visit about. The first time I met this individual in person was actually when I was talking about dry aging, and my eyes were opened, and it's time to bring Neville McNaughton and Sanitary Designs to the forefront. We need to talk about this. So Neville, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yes. Well, so first off, I want to learn a little bit, or I want you to share with the audience a little bit of what Sanitary Designs is, because you have a lot of different avenues you can go with this technologies that you discuss, and then we'll get a little bit more into kind of the precision nature of what can be done with the technologies that you use here. So take it away.
All right. So SDI, Sanitary Design Industries, as we've called ourselves today, was the outshoot of an organization called Cheese Source, which I set up back in around about 2000, when I decided that I could did not need to work for a corporate master. And so I literally jumped ship and had no job and hung up my shingle and said, I'm a cheese consultant. So you have to be very opinionated to do things like that, and a little bit arrogant because you think you know enough to be of value to others. And so I saw these new entrants into the artisan cheese business. They had money, they had passion, but they really didn't have critical knowledge. And so I said, I have some of that critical knowledge, and if I could share it, I would love to do that. And so I got together with other independent contractors, and we have access to grant writers, which often comes before the project even starts. I have access to HACCP and food safety programs, which has got to be in place by the end of the project. I put all that together, and a couple of smart engineers over the year, and we developed ideas and solutions. And so by the time we were done, I've got a few notes here. We would do grant writing, marketing plans, business plans, floor plans, equipment selection. We would design equipment when you couldn't find what you wanted. And then we also showed them how to make cheese. And I never know quite what to call that, but it was manufacturing process to make cheeses. And we focused entirely on quality. So today I can tell you that if you buy a vat that's too small, you'll never make money. And if you buy one of this size, you're almost guaranteed to be a success. And that's the kind of critical knowledge that people need to understand, is that if you have a 50-gallon vat, you will never make enough money to pay for your time at that cheese vat. If you understand that up front, you won't be disappointed. If you say, I want to make a profit and hand it on to my children, or I want the weekends off, 600 gallons is the way to go. So that was the cheese part. But so that was SDI. We're still more busy with cheese this year and next year than we ever imagined we would be. We've got a lot of projects on the books and a lot going on. But we dream about the day when we can bring more of this to the meat side. And so we've started off with one key piece of equipment, and that's the aging room. But I see everything changing in the years ahead, Phil. We still use a lot of ceiling mounted evaporators, and I believe they will become a thing of the past at some point, because you can't clean them when the room is full of product. People cover the product and they say they do, but really you have to take it out, and sometimes you have no place to put it.
Well, and so this is a great segue, and I'm glad you eventually got to the meat side of things, because I'm sure there's listeners out there going, why are we having a cheese program right now? Which I think we need to have a cheese program, but because it goes so well with meat, of course. But you mentioned your progression from the cheese industry and how we can apply it to meat, and that's where you and I met, was at a dry aging discussion. We were talking about dry aging, and regularly. When we're talking about dry aging, and this is where your technology comes in, we're regularly mentioning relative humidity. And I didn't know if I was going to jump over and strangle you and tackle you, or if I was going to jump over and give you a big old hug, because um, you changed my thinking, you changed my paradigm in that room. And I want you to talk a little bit about relative humidity and this concept of dew point, because once folks start to understand that, wow, what a mind-opening experience. So take it away.
You have to promise me that we'll talk a little bit about the article in the AAMP that had your name on it as well.
Go ahead.
The concept of dry aging began before refrigeration was ever invented. And it was typically seasonal, so that you'd have a piglet in the spring, you'd fatten them up during the summer, you'd slaughter them in the autumn, and you were hopefully in a region where, if you were going to make salami or sausage, or simply dry age the meat and hang it, you had to have a dew point, a vapor pressure that was sufficiently low to allow the water to come out of the product. And I remember this very well when I was in France in the Auvergne, and they had meat hanging up in the barn, up in the mountains, and it was dry. But it wasn't dry all year round, but it was dry in the winter. And so that preserved that meat on the way through to eating it during the winter and into the spring when you didn't have meat. So when we talk about relative humidity is actually a calculation. It's not a thing. It's not a prime measurement. And everyone thinks they understand relative humidity until you point out that you can have the same relative humidity at many different temperatures. And so now we have air with different amounts of water in it, because the temperature is different, because the ability of the air to hold water changes with temperature. And when you understand that dew point and dry bulb, which is the temperature, can be used to calculate relative humidity, and you focus on those two elements, if you control them, you will have the relative humidity that you want. And so many systems look at relative humidity, and it becomes quite convoluted how you get to control, where the controls that we have are remarkably simple. It is possible to control two things in the room with one device called the coil. Your coil temperature in the room really dictates or sets the dew point. The amount of air that flows across that coil determines how much cooling you get. So if you want to change the temperature of the air in the room, you want lots of airflow across the coil to bring the temperature down. But when you get to your target dry bulb, wouldn't it be nice if you could just slow down the fans? Which we do. We stop the fans, we stop cooling the air, and then the control continues to focus on dew point. And if the dew point becomes satisfied, we warm up the coil to stop taking out water. So two things occur on our coils. And I say our coils because conventional refrigeration doesn't embrace that air management over the coil for those reasons. And so that's what we did, and it's been very successful.
So so to break this down just a little bit, and we're gonna go a little bit deeper into this too, but to break this down for the listeners out there, if you go into your refrigeration, whatever, you'll see the unit running, and then when you reach a temperature, it turns off. So it's either on or it's off. And what Neville mentioned to me and it took me a minute to finally realize what it is that the big difference is that you more modulate that velocity, or maybe I'm using the wrong term, but it's not an on or off situation. It's just constantly trying to make sure that, and tell me if I'm wrong, that the coil is the coldest thing in the room.
That's the motto. That's correct.
All right. And if we can do that, that's drawing the moisture to it. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And we're probably going too quickly, but the article that was in the AAMP that highlighted common defects on carcasses during dry aging is a solvable problem. And yet I think the readers of that article said, oh, it's just a fact of life. That's what happens when you have conventional refrigeration. What happens is, in a conventional room, you open the door and the room was at temperature. The solenoid was closed and the coil was at the same temperature as the room and the same temperature as the product. You roll in a new carcass that's above the temperature of the room, and that vapor that's coming off the carcass is looking for a home. And it has an equal home on a carcass or the coil or the wall, the ceiling or the floor. The minute that the solenoid opens, because the temperature in the room changed, the coil becomes cold and starts grabbing the moisture. But the damage was done in those first minutes in the room because the vapor was condensing on your carcasses.
Remember, guys, so folks out there listening, it's the reason why so many folks either have a little pump or have a drain or something that's coming off of the coils in your refrigeration unit, because it's pulling water. It's trying to, it's capturing water, but it's more pulsatile under our traditional systems. Neville's system and Sanitary Designs has one that it's constantly the coldest thing in the room. Is that right?
Yes. And our sensor is like super sensitive. And I do this test with my cheese people. And we set up rooms, and I tell them to go outside the room, and the sensor might be 60 feet away in the room, and I'll take a bucket of warm water and tip it inside the door 30, 40, 50, 60 feet away. And then I hear them say, it moved. And they see the sensor on our screen, and they say, oh, it's already changing. The dew point in the room is because vapor is what changes. We're trying to focus on vapor pressure. If you know the dew point, you know the vapor pressure. If we put vapor in the room, it changes the dew point, and it's quick. And the irony is there can only be one vapor pressure in the room because it's pressure. The whole room has one pressure. And so you tip it in at the door, and the sensor at the other end of the room, which we try to put them as far away from the door as possible, and it's instant. People see it on our screen within a split second. So all of a sudden, it opens the valve and makes the coil colder because it's seeing this load. It hasn't even figured out how much load at that point, but it's into it and grabbing that moisture. And if there's an unimpeded path from the product to the coil, it will grab that moisture very, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, and something else. So to go a little bit deeper, and I know we're going quick, and this is where, if somebody really needs to understand all the basics of this stuff, call Neville. We'll give him an opportunity to share how to get a hold of him. But I want to talk about vapor pressure a little bit more, and to kind of this is going to be a pun, not intended, but to boil it down is that we're looking for a temperature in which that moisture that's in the carcass or in the subprimals that we're trying to dry age, we're looking for a temperature in which that moisture wants to leave. And you and I were discussing one time, and I can't remember who came up with the term. I'm going to give you credit for it, but we're looking for a cold boil, essentially. This is a brand new idea, guys. We're looking for a way to get that moisture out of the meat, but at a very, very cold temperature for safety reasons and everything, but also very controlled. And it's like I'm trying to evaporate a pot of water, and we can either turn it all the way up, or we can just leave it there, and it's going to evaporate eventually. But we're trying to do it in a very controlled, timely manner, and that's kind of where this technology is coming in. Did I get some of that right?
You did it absolutely right. I give you all the credit for the cold boil because you certainly stimulated a great discussion. But that's exactly what's happening. We are vaporizing water at very low temperatures because of the reduced vapor pressure around the product. And I think a lot of people, again, often say they understand water activity, but water activity is described as the partial vapor pressure of the product. So the amount of free water in the product is what determines your water activity, and it's very similar to the relative humidity of the product. It's expressed as a factor of 1, not of 100. But in the cannabis business that we've been involved in somewhat, we are able to set the dew point in such a way that we never over dry that flower. Because the biggest danger is you have perfect flowers and you start drying them, but it over dries. And dehumidifiers only have one dew point. A dehumidifier is set at 32 degrees, right? That's how it is. But you don't need 32 degrees to have the right room to dry cannabis. You can actually set it so that it's a beautiful curve, and it comes in and then it stops when it hits that, and you just let it sit at that condition, and it will stabilize and become shelf stable. But it's not 32, which is what happens when you use a dehumidifier, or if you use conventional refrigeration, might have a dew point of below 30. It's wrong. And so focusing on and understanding dew point has some real tangible value.
So guys, think about, because most of the folks listening here probably have refrigeration boxes that probably have a lot of moisture in it, but I want you to think about the idea of the dehumidifier, which is really like a compact air conditioning unit. If you ever turn air conditioning on in the summertime, especially in a humid environment, it dries the air. It dries that room. And that's kind of the concept, but it's either on or it's off. And that's where this kind of cool tech, this is where I get excited. The cool technology is that you guys figured out a way to make it so does it have like an infinite range essentially?
Yeah.
In theory. Yeah. I mean,
so we're doing some work at the moment, but for us, a dew point between 32.5 on upwards, because if you go below there, you start getting icing up on your coils. Now, and so we've had to introduce defrost cycles and what have you for some of the very low temperature products like dry aged beef. So we are coming up with strategies to remove ice as quickly as possible. So you shed the ice and begin the process. But in a perfect world, you would avoid a freeze up of moisture on the coil. So it's not infinite, but in the upward direction, of course, when your dew point and your dry bulb are the same, it's 100% humidity. The further apart, the drier the room.
Right. Yeah. Pretty crazy technology. Okay, you just mentioned the next thing that I wanted to get into. You said the drier the room. And before we got on here, there are folks out there that I want to share with Neville and his team who need some help with condensation problems in their plants. So if the folks that are still listening, and you were wondering, well, I don't do any dry aging. What's this point? What's the point for me? Guys, this technology could very well be a potential solution for condensation in plants. Folks that are out there, especially on fresh meats, we all know the maintenance guy walking around with a long pole and a towel on the end of it, and always constantly wiping down pipes and anything that's collecting condensate, and that's a big problem from a food safety perspective. Tell me, do you think we can solve some of the issues with condensation in plants?
I'm certain that we can. My vertical air handler that we have has a very high latent ratio. So if I'm running a room, I get about 50% of the energy is going into the removal of water all the time. Whereas standard refrigeration is nowhere near that high. We have also just done a job where we have incorporated basically aging room technology into the production room and the packing room technology at the end of the day after washdown. So the room has been kept cool and they've set the humidity for operations. But when they leave the room, they actually raise the temperature, but hold the dew point. And that lowers the humidity. And all of a sudden, it just sucks the moisture off all the surfaces. One of the dangers, and it's when we make a room very cold, all those surfaces are below the dew point of the ambient air outside the room.
Okay.
So if you have a corridor that can get where air can come in from outside and it can get to your production room that you might have been holding quite cool, or a cutting room, that moist air is coming rushing into the room and it's looking for cold surfaces. And one example was where a group would, they'd wash up and then they would turn on the cooling to dry out the room. And they saw an immediate improvement, but overall it was negative because they made the walls cold, they made the floor cold. It was 80 degrees outside, it was 75% humidity. The dew point's probably about 70, and it comes rushing in and finds walls at 40.
Wow. I mean, folks, if I mean, this is some pretty extensive. This is a lot of science that's happening here, but let's think about this. So instead of it being just say a blast of air from a fan, now it's moving moisture and whatever else might be in that air toward that cold surface, as you've mentioned. And if it's under conventional refrigeration, everything's super cold in that room. But if we don't have a place for that moisture to travel to, then every surface now is a potential for contaminant that came from the outside. Is that what you're saying, Neville?
I am saying, and you try and create a visual. So imagine you had a rock in the corner of the production room and you could make it really cold. It would gather water and it would run right down the drain in the corner of the room. And because that's what we want to do. We want that location, a coil or a rock that's super cold, attracting the moisture, but not making the whole room cold. And so that involves getting the air to the coil, making sure the coil is good and cold, and not focusing on making the room cold, because then it becomes the point of condensation.
So folks, if you have more interest, I mean, we could probably go on for an awful long time here, but if you have more interest, I want Neville to get the opportunity to share his company's information, but reach out. I mean, this is some pretty cool technology. I've passed it up a lot of different chains because I believe that this needs to be implemented in a lot of facilities, especially it's funny, we often think about the old facilities that really need the updates, and I think I'm seeing more condensation problem in newer plants, probably because there's so much smooth surface that it attracts the moisture, but then it just runs right down. And so this is something that we need to address. Furthermore, folks that are looking into dry aging of meats that need to be at a cold temperature or not necessarily at a cold temperature, and that's what you just mentioned, Neville, is that this is still a technology that it doesn't necessarily have to refrigerate the room, but creates that cold rock, that cold part of the room that the moisture is going to want to go to. And so now we're looking into salami rooms and salumi type production, where we're trying to pull moisture, but in a very controlled manner.
Can I make one last comment, Phil?
Of course. We're not done, but yes, of course.
I want to, again, it's all about framing people's minds. And by having a modulating coil that's always connected to the job at hand, right? It doesn't turn off when it's satisfied and turn back on. We are going to take moisture from your product all the time at the same rate all the time. And we have already been told it leads to less case hardening. Because when you pull hard and stop, you are being very brutal to the proteins on that product or the skin or those adjacent to the edge. And you dry them out to the point of no return, right? You denature them and they don't rehydrate. And so it is absolutely a better way to pull all the time. And some of the old tech did that by having two coils, and they were static coils on a ceiling, and they would have half the coils would be on and they would start to attract moisture, and they would turn them off and the other coils would turn on to continue to pull. But they also had problems with ice and often at too lower temperatures. And so if you can find that perfect temperature that relates to the dew point relative to the humidity and temperature that you want, you can actually pull the water all the time. And so that produces, and so reports are softest product ever for a water activity.
That's an excellent point too. And I mean, talking about case hardening and even it's not a term that we use much in like the fresh dry aged side of things, but it's something similar can happen. And yeah, we definitely need to be trying to control that and oftentimes the best way of doing that is, well, I'm just going to dry age in a really wet environment. And so but not everybody has that. And so if we can just it's almost like we're throwing band-aids at a solution or at a problem, whereas the actual problem is just the turning on and the turning off of that coil. And so by having that, and something else that I think about too is I live out in the country. I live on a well. I know that well pump will eventually wear out on me because it's turned on and turned off and turned on and turned off. And it's always, the belief that, well, it's better to just either leave it run or leave it off. And it sounds like this might even be a technology that can extend the life of some of these refrigeration or humidity controlling mechanisms, because it's kind of gradually always on instead of that hard on, hard off.
It's part of the reason, Phil, that we switched over to glycol. It's easier to modulate the cold glycol flow through the coil than it is to modulate the refrigerant direct expansion. And I'm going to say it's not impossible. We still do it. And so it really depends on the customer. And so we've got a great installation out in Washington State where they hooked us up to a rack of refrigeration, because to manage the refrigerant through the coil, you do that by controlling the pressure in the coil. The pressure and temperature are inversely related. Or not inversely, but they're directly relative to one another. And when you do that with a single compressor, compressors do not like to be throttled. They don't like to be slowed down. They have an optimum spot where they are very efficient. And so we tried that. And but if you hook us up to a rack, it works perfectly because it's a buffer. The rack has got other loads and all sorts of things, and it doesn't really notice the load. And often we're throttling. It's when you get down to very low loads on a coil and you now are using a condensing unit at 10% of its capacity, it gets really grumpy.
Okay. Yeah.
And you have to put strategies in place like create a false load so it doesn't overheat. And then you move into the inefficient aspect of it's running all the time, but a lot of the time it's not doing any work. It's just keeping itself from self-destructing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sounds like shifting gears in a car for those who remember doing that. Well, I think it's time to go ahead and start landing this plane. I want to, you've already mentioned a little bit of your background, but I want the listeners, I like to do a little bit of autobiographical discussion here. And so tell the folks a little bit about how you got into the food world, if you don't mind. That's a Tennessee accent, right? Is that, or is it more of a Carolina accent?
What's that?
I'm just teasing.
My accent?
Yeah.
You don't know where this accent comes from?
I know exactly where it is. You had to tell me at one time, but tell the listeners, because you came from a land far, far away.
Yeah, I was not a very good student, and so I didn't graduate from high school. Disappointed my parents immensely, and I took the first job that came along because I wanted to be employed, and I ended up in a bottling plant back in the very early 70s. And it was a strange time to be looking. It didn't matter where you went. If you didn't like your job, you could walk down the street and get another one. I did 2 years there, ended up in a cheese plant, and I was fortunate after a correspondence course, they let me go back to Massey University. So I actually graduated in 1977 with a diploma in dairy technology, which is very much about applied science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm a bit of a hack, but if you put your mind to it, it all makes sense. And as one fellow said, it's all in a book, Neville. Just go read and you'll find it. It's in a book. So I never forgot that. So I had a great run in New Zealand, making cheeses other than cheddar, right? Because the whole country makes cheddar. And then after 10 years, I started my own company, and a little company called Capity Cheeses that went on to become a national brand. And while I was working there and had that started, I was offered a position in the US to come across and look for opportunities for New Zealand cheese in North America. And there weren't many. It's restricted by licenses and the types of cheese you can bring in. And when you're making cheese in New Zealand, the grass grows seasonally. You can make cheese for 6 months, but the market up here is 12 months, and it doesn't always fit very well. But I left New Zealand Milk Products, and I ended up working for an enzyme company out of the UK, and that's what brought me to St. Louis. And I've been here ever since 1994. We came to St. Louis, and I left that company in 2000. And that's when I hung up my shingle and said, I'm going to go be a cheese consultant. And, I got to say, probably no regrets. It's not been easy, but it has been a fun time working in cheese and into meat. And I see our tech now being applied to many other industries, and that's a good thing. And we are now have a new generation of people at SDI, so they have a future as well. So it's as you can tell, it's retirement time for Neville.
Well, I have to say, so the first lengthy conversation that Neville and I had was it was very eye-opening to me, and the terminology and the science that you were bringing in. I finally came out and said, "What are you, a physicist?" And no, very quickly, Neville, you said, "No, I'm a cheesemaker." So you never know where things are going to take you, but I think you really said it. It's in a book. Open your mind. Don't be afraid to do some research on your own. Don't be afraid to do some learning, and get out there and learn from those who know. And Neville, you're definitely a different breed. You're able to really teach yourself. I think you have a really cool technology. I want folks to be able to reach out to you. What's the best way to do that?
Well, we do have a website, and so Sanitary Designs is always there. It's going to be completely relaunched again here in the next couple of months.
Okay.
I'm Neville at sanitarydesigns.com. Anytime. I tell people, call me anytime, because if I'm not here, you don't need me. And, the milk's running down the drain, so
Right.
you're going to figure it out one way or another. But yeah, we don't think we're hard to find, although we do notice that it's amazing how many people just don't know we're out there. And so,
yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure getting to know you. I hope that we can continue to learn together, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us here at MeatsPad. So thanks a lot, Neville. All right.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Take care.
You bet.